I think we're ready to go. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our webinar, Unlocking the Potential of PLLP, A Broker's Guide to Environmental Insurance. My name is Ben Stone, and I'm a senior underwriter in distinguished programs with over 20 years in various environmental roles. I'd previously held pollution liability underwriting roles in both AXA XL and AIG. My background includes a bachelor's in forest resources and experience in environmental consulting from lab work to stream restoration. I'm very excited to facilitate today's discussion with members of our new program. We pride ourselves on having the experience, flexibility, and the depth of expertise to help brokers get their deals done, and the team members you're going to meet today exemplify that. We will send all registrants a copy of the slides, the webinar recording, as well as a PDF with the question and answers from today's session. And if anyone has a question during the presentation, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And know whatever you're asking is probably on someone else's mind too. So don't hesitate, push that button and let those questions fly. So Distinguished Programs is a leading national insurance program manager, providing specialized insurance programs for real estate, community association, hotels, restaurants, fine art and collectibles, and environmental and construction professional. You ready to dive into the world of pollution legal liability insurance? Let's do this. Joining us today, we have Samantha Linton. Samantha is an environmental operations specialist with over 15 years of environmental underwriting and consulting experience. She transitioned to Distinguished in 2023 as part of a new partnership with SiriusPoint. During her 5 years at SiriusPoint Environmental and continuing today, Samantha manages a book of business that includes premises pollution liability, contractors pollution liability, as well as contractors pollution and professional liability. Before SiriusPoint, Samantha was a master underwriter for Great American Insurance Group. Samantha is well prepared to take on these environmental insurance roles, having previously worked in environmental consulting as both an assistant project manager and a staff scientist at 2 different firms in New Jersey. Samantha's education includes a Bachelor of Science in Environmental Studies from Gettysburg College in 2006, and she currently resides in the Philadelphia area. She also goes by Sam, which pretty sure I'm gonna slip up and call her at some point during this presentation very soon. We also have Casey Jones. Casey is the National Environmental Practice Leader for Distinguished Environmental and sports over 25 years of environmental underwriting, regulatory, and consulting experience. Like Samantha, he transitioned to Distinguished in 2023 as part of the partnership with SiriusPoint. Prior to this, Casey was a regional manager for the Western region for Great American Insurance Group based out of San Francisco. That's where Casey lives. And Casey's used to wearing 2 hats, having managed the highest performing region at Great American while also maintaining his own book of business that included premises pollution liability, contractors pollution liability, and contractors pollution and professional liability. Casey also worked at AIG as a pollution underwriter and has held leadership and management roles at 3 different environmental consulting firms in San Francisco. Casey was also a hazardous materials environmental regulator for the Nevada County Environmental Health Department in California, and he earned his Bachelor's of Science in Biological Science from Cal State Chico in 1996. Finally, he holds a California resident producer and a surplus lines license. So to ground the conversation, I thought we'd quickly run through some of our PLLP program basics and then get to some attendee questions. So Casey, let's kick it off with a quick softball if you don't mind. What is pollution legal liability insurance?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Ben. It's pretty straightforward. I mean, Distinguishes Pollution Legal Liability Plus, or PLLP, insurance product protects against environmental liabilities not typically covered by a GL or general liability policy. PLLP insurance can cover first and third-party claims for cleanup, as well as third-party claims for bodily injury, property damage, and environmental damage resulting from pollution conditions on, at, under, or migrating through a property.
Great, thanks Casey. So Samantha, Casey mentioned not typically covered by a GL policy. So what's unique about environmental liability that you think may be scaring off the GL market from taking on pollution exposures on their products?
Sure. So before the total pollution condition exclusion, GL policies mostly did cover these exposures, but as asbestos liability started hitting the policies in the 70s and 80s and the stringent nature of the environmental law under CERCLA, which holds each defendant liable for the entire cleanup, the market had to adapt and respond. The GL market saw the same thing that we see today with pollutants, in that by the time you figure out what the health risks are, the cat may well be outside the bag, so to speak. The total pollution exclusion is broad by design to exclude not only what we know to be an environmental hazard, but also pollutants that we just don't know enough about yet to consider the implications. There are countless examples of these over the years that you would likely be familiar with, including DDT, lead-based paint, and more recently, glyphosate, which is the active ingredient in Roundup. Our PLLP policy has a broad definition of pollutant that is designed to plug the hole left by the GL pollution exclusions and address the environmental contaminants that we already know about and those we don't fully yet understand.
Excellent. Yeah, thanks, Sam. So who needs this PLP insurance in your eyes, Casey?
I mean, really any business that operates in the built environment could have a pollution exposure. Our industry sees some pretty wild stuff. Do you like wine, Ben? You don't have to answer that online, but the one recent example in the news where 600,000 gallons of wine were released at a winery when 2 storage tanks suddenly ruptured, flooding local streets, threatening to impact a river. Basically, too much of a good or bad thing in the wrong place could be a pollutant. It's also common for savvy landlords to require PLLP coverage of their tenants when tenants' operations pose a potential pollution exposure. And then lately, we've seen a lot more lender-driven deals where the bank is requiring the borrower to secure PLLP coverage on collateral property that is polluted or has a high likelihood of being impacted. Just think about all those regional banks out there with this exposure on their books. We have that solution for them.
Well, my wife would be bummed about that release, Casey, but yeah.
Same.
So, so what about our PLLP policy here at Distinguished, Sam? Would you mind giving our audience an overview of the key coverage that are included in our policy form?
Sure. The PLLP insurance policy provides coverage for cleanup costs, bodily injury, property damage, which includes the natural resource damage, and legal expenses for new and/or historical pollution conditions on, at, under, or migrating from or through a covered location or indoor contaminant condition. The indoor contaminant condition actually includes the mold and Legionella as well. Distinguished pollution legal liability insurance policy also provides coverage for mortgage protection, diminution in value, business interruption, non-owned disposal sites, transportation of an insured's waste or products, and contracting services.
Great. Thanks, Sam. So yeah, Sam mentioned the mold and Legionella covers that we provide, Casey, and I thought, if you don't mind, I might a little bit of additional commentary on that exposure.
Yeah, it absolutely warrants more conversation because mold is our loss leader on the PLL product line. Earlier, I mentioned landlords requiring PLLP coverage of their tenants, but landlords of multifamily residential apartments, commercial buildings, et cetera, are directly exposed to potential claims from their tenants due to mold. We've all heard of the horror stories of toxic mold. It's real. We have paid the claims to prove it as well. These same landlords should also be aware of their exposure to Legionella or Legionnaire's disease. Legionella is caused by a bacteria that can grow in stagnant water pipes or cooling towers. It typically affects the immunocompromised population, think elderly or very young. And if the landlord doesn't take proper care, this could also lead to claims from the tenants. Again, this is no joke. We've paid the claims to prove it. And hospitality or hotels and resorts also share these 2 significant exposures. Very important.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Yeah, I feel like I've seen that just in my time in environmental insurance, kind of mold going from a lesser concern to a much more significant liability with you mentioned the claims frequency and severity kind of growing over those years. But that being said, take me to the future, Sam. What's the next major pollutant that we're going to see driving claims activity?
I feel like we're kind of in the midst of a pollutant that's going to be discussed for a while right now. PFAS is being talked about constantly. It's associated with a wide range of industries. It's actually a man-made chemical from the 1940s, and it's been deemed the forever chemical because of the long amount of time it takes to break down. Like I said before, it's in a wide range of industries and kind of in everything. Probably most prevalent is firefighting foam, fast food containers, anything with non-stick, so cooking pans, and also water-resistant fabrics and carpeting. What's interesting about these emergent contaminants is that each state is approaching them a little bit differently. There's some guidance from the EPA, but then it's up to the state to decide what their next steps are. For instance, Michigan has been tracking wastewater treatment plants backwards to identify the source areas. So we're identifying areas such as car washes, which originally we didn't think were going to be a source of these PFAS. Additionally, states like New Jersey, they're actually requiring sampling of PFAS in all their open cases right now. So you either have to prove why your site wouldn't be impacted with PFAS or provide the sampling data. More recently, we've also been hearing about carbon tetrachloride and 1,4-dioxane, and states are really taking into their own hands of where and when their sampling is required for these as well. It's going to be interesting to see how these pollutants are approached as more information is obtained.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, that's expertise. So we're so lucky to have you on our team. So Casey, you had mentioned earlier some of the various client types that need PLLP insurance, but what about just some more specific classes of business that you consider good targets for PLLP?
Yeah, you bet. Like I mentioned before, multifamily residential, commercial office, hospitality, but we should add airports, warehouse distribution facilities, which are booming right now. You see them popping up everywhere. Environmental facilities, landfills, manufacturing facilities, properties that'll be redeveloped, very key piece of coverage for insureds that are redeveloping properties. Brownfields and agricultural facilities, not just farms, but also the facilities, the businesses that support the farms that distribute the chemicals, that sort of stuff for ag facilities.
Great. So when one of our broker partners, they want to submit a PLLP submission to your inbox, Samantha, what are the factors that you will use to determine the cost of the pollution legal liability insurance?
So the cost is really determined by a lot of factors. It's really the nature and the extent of the environmental risk, coverage limits, SIR amount, the industry type, the location, historical pollution conditions, and just any specific policy considerations that we may find when we underwrite the account.
Perfect. So, all right, so now it's time for the questions. So we thought we'd start with, we had quite a few questions that came in advance via email, and then after we knock those out, hopefully if we still have some time, we're going to go live to today's attendee questions. I do see a couple popping up here. So one broker wanted to know, what is distinguished pollution legal liability insurance capacity? If you don't mind, Casey, could you help with that?
Yeah, you bet. We can offer limits of liability up to 25 million each incident and 25 million in the aggregate. Most of our book is less than 5 million in limits, but we can offer up to 25 million. And this may be shocking to many of you out there. We offer policy terms up to 10 years and even 13 years for lenders or lender-driven deals. That's a full 13. That's not an ERP. It's a full 13 years of coverage. So a bit different, a different type of policy here. And then our minimum premium is around $5,000 for an annual policy, low limits, low exposure type of policy.
Perfect. So I had to reword this question. I couldn't resist, Sam. What distinguishes distinguished for PLLP coverage?
Well, I guess what really stands out is that we have a deep industry knowledge. We're able to really customize insurance solutions, and we're really committed to the customer service portion of our policies. When lenders start to get the cold feet from a deal because of environmental concerns that they see, we can really confidently step in. We can guide you through the process, really look through the due diligence reports that we receive. A lot of us, we were the consultants back in the day, so we are really reading and reviewing the same reports that we used to write. So we've really just simplified the insurance process for our brokers and make it easy to choose us.
Great. So yeah, I thought this was a good question to highlight the value of working with our team on PLLP, Casey. The question was, can you advise on how geographic factors influence environmental law?
Well, I mean, look, I'm out here in California, and you know, we're in the news a lot when it comes to environmental regulation. Yes, California is a hot spot for that, but there are also several other states, such as New Jersey, New York, Michigan, Massachusetts. The reality is more and more states are implementing their own specific and often more restrictive regulations. I mean, the boroughs of New York even have their own set of regulations that are specific just to the boroughs and not the rest of the state. So it really is our experienced and diligent team Like Sam mentioned earlier, most of us are environmental engineers, consultants in prior years, prior jobs. A few of us were regulators, myself, some other underwriters. So we pretty expansive knowledge across the country and in these states. So it's our job to stay on top of these ever-changing regulations, and we love it.
Indeed, we do. So Sam, what support and resources are available for brokers working with Distinguished on PLLP opportunities?
Distinguished offers dedicated support, training, marketing materials, access to experts, and that really help assist brokers in placing the PLLP business. Our marketing materials have been really helpful. We're also able to provide a lot of claims incidences that just really help sell the product. We also have an in-house claims attorneys with decades of related experience, as well as our own 24/7, 365 emergency response capabilities.
Perfect. So yeah, and then I had one questioner here who would like to know which carrier that we use for our PLLP offering. You got that there, Casey?
Oh yeah, you bet. Our coverage is, we write on Serious Point paper, coverage provided by Serious Point. They've been a pillar of the insurance industry for nearly 80 years now. And Serious Point's paper enjoys an AM Best rating of A- excellent.
Great. So Sam, you got to help this guy out, this guy or lady, I'm not sure, but it sounds like this next broker wants to manage their stress level for working with our team. And they want to know what's the typical turnaround time for a PLLP policy. Can you put their concerns to rest, Sam?
Sure. So we can offer a really quick turnaround time, as little as less than 24 hours if need be. But typical turnaround time is usually within a business week.
Yeah. I think that's fast, right? I hope so. So now for a process question, Casey. So how can brokers register and submit the pollution legal liability insurance application with Distinguished?
Yeah, if you're not already registered, brokers can register their agency by downloading the pollution legal liability insurance application, completing and submitting it via email to Doug Stepanowski or to myself, and we'll share these email addresses here with y'all.
Good, because yeah, I'm Stepanowski spelling challenge when I came on board, so we definitely need to share that with the materials. So we have now arrived at the fun part. You guys can stump our experts with some live questions. We've been sending through I have it right here. Let me look. We got some questions coming in. Another person asked about the turnaround time, Sam, so you knocked that out already. So I thought this was a good one. How about, would you consider contractors for PLLP? What do you think about that one, Sam?
So we do offer contracting services on our PLLP form. So we can consider some of the contracting services that are provided. Also, I guess too, there are the instances where we can do a, now that I'm losing, we can offer link limits between our two policies too, if that's easier, because the coverage that is provided on the PLLP is a little bit, it's not as broad as just a full-on contracting form, but we do have the capabilities to offer the contracting services on the PLLP.
Perfect. I had a question here, Casey, about you're my geography guy earlier, so this is a little bit of a geography question. Are you able to write accounts that are water adjacent terminal operations?
Sure. I mean, a full-on petroleum fuel terminal is probably not our cup of tea, but we can certainly underwrite and provide coverage for water adjacent operations of many types. Yep, absolutely, and we do many a lot on our book. Yep.
And are you going to do that on a claims made basis? Someone wanted to know if your policies are claims made.
The cleanup coverage is claims made. Yes, there are other coverages. I wouldn't say ancillary, they're meaningful, but there are coverages that are occurrence, but yes, the cleanup coverage is claims made.
Oh, I should have followed this on when you were describing the CPL, or you were talking about how we can do the CPL and then do the length limits on the PLLP, Sam. Yeah. Another person had asked a question where they were saying when you do that, so let's say you got your 25 mil capacity that Casey told us about earlier. are you going to be able to do that per location or policy? And more specifically, they were asking like if they were to do what you had said, where you do the PLLP and also link it with a CPL, is it going to be 25 total or 25 per policy?
So we can offer 25 million for a policy, and then I guess if it would be for the same first named insured for a situation where it would be including the same covered locations, we would have to cap it at the 25. So we would have to link the limits on that.
Okay, so it's 25 pretty much per project, more or less, would be one.
But if the insured wanted a standalone CPL, we could do 25 million on that, and a standalone PLLP, we could do 25 million on that without linking limits, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I guess they did say for a development project, they were saying, so maybe they were talking about that. Okay, here we go. Fun one. Who wants it? Tell us about asbestos claims.
Asbestos claims. Well, I guess the PLL policy does not cover cleanup of the asbestos in the buildings, but it does cover what historically has been the asbestos concern, which is bodily injury. We do pick that up in our base form, and that is something we underwrite to. So that's something that is covered by this, and that's the gap, I guess, that Sam spoke about earlier, that we are picking up by this policy. So yes, we would pick up a bodily injury claim potentially on a PLLP location. Yep.
And here, I thought this was a good one, Sam. You know, I get excited about a question like this. If you don't have full phase 1 reports or other due diligence, is there a way to get creative and still get some level of pre-existing coverage?
Yeah, of course there is. So there's actually a lot of resources that we have available to us. We have availability to look at historic aerials, so that's super helpful in being able to determine what's happening at a location. We also have the ability to look at some databases. There's one that we have that we can pull up what sites have associated, if they have hazardous materials at their property or something like that. Also, each state has a database too, so we're able to look through addresses for each state then, and if there's anything that's been a cleanup at that site, it usually pops up. Some states have a better database than others, but you know, we are able to get some sort of background on some of these sites. So yes, we are able to do that.
I think we do that pretty well. I'll just chime in too, just given that our team, most of us were environmental engineers, consultants, or regulators prior, I think we know where to look and are comfortable looking for that information.
Yeah, it makes you feel like you didn't waste your time when I used to write all those phase 1 reports. Now I still use those skills.
That's right.
The good of the insurance product, so that's good. So yeah, so one person mentioned, my insured is demolishing a building which includes asbestos. Would you cover the resulting asbestos on the ground as a result? I guess that's kind of a follow-on to what you were discussing, Casey, as a result of the demo.
So I guess the question is, when they demoed, did some of the asbestos get into the soil and the ground? We would typically, for most redevelopment properties like that, we would have a soil or building materials disposal exclusion on that. So we consider that really the cost of doing business. They know they have the building, they know it's asbestos in it. That's just part of the program. I would say if there was some sort of sampling done beforehand that the building did not have asbestos in it, we may be able to underwrite around that. But typically on a redevelopment, if we know we've got an issue at the site, we're going to typically exclude at least the disposal part of that. Now the BIPD part, the bodily injury piece, would still remain in effect. It would just be for the cleanup costs associated with that.
Great. And so I did have 2 people asking about 2 different questioners back to back asking about gas stations. Sam, do you mind speaking to that about what our appetite, do we consider those on the PLLP?
Sure. So our PLLP does have a UST exclusion, but we are able to modify that. We can schedule tanks on the policy. It really depends upon how old the tanks are, what the operations are like. That's really going to be the main driver in this. We don't want to see tanks that are incredibly old. I want to say probably late 90s would probably be our cutoff for how old we were looking at. We would definitely hope that they would be double walled, fiberglass, something like that. As far as gas stations previously out of sight, that's something we can consider too, if that's the exposure that anybody's concerned about. If there's a redevelopment, we can take that into account. So we don't write a ton of gas station portfolios by any means, but it is something that we can consider if we have the information that we're able to underwrite to.
Somebody had also asked about if we do coverage for benzene, which is in gasoline. And I think the answer is, that's the easy one for you, right, Sam? No problem.
Yeah, that our definition of pollutant is extremely broad. It's basically anything that's not in its container, not in the place, not where it's supposed to be, for the most part.
One last one. It looks like we're getting kind of tight on time, so I'll give one last one. You mentioned that apartment owners or apartment buildings were a class, Casey. So this person was just, I guess, clarifying that they would be able to offer coverage to our apartment owners. They said.
Absolutely, yeah. That's one of the more common policies that we write is apartment complex or portfolio of apartment complexes where the landlord or owner is the first name insured. Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. So thanks for all that. So yeah, time is running a bit short. So just a quick reminder that we'll send copies of the slides, the webinar recording, and a PDF with the Q&A from today's session to everyone who registered. This will also include questions that were asked in the chat during the webinar. But if you have any further inquiries, please get in touch with either Casey or Samantha directly. And then I hope you enjoyed today's webinar, but if you did, so just stay updated on our latest events by following us on social media. We like to post about insurance market insights, industry news, and you'll also learn about our latest webinars, ebooks, and case studies.
Hey, Ben, really quick, I just want, if anyone has a question out there, maybe you're not sure if you have an insured that has a risk or not, just give us a call. We love to talk through this stuff. So here's a resource as well.
Absolutely. So thanks to everyone who joined us today for the webinar, and to our panelists, Casey and Samantha, both for sharing their valuable insights. Hope you had a good time, Sam. Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Ben.
Yeah.